I move to approve that the request to waive liquidated damages due to the late resignation of Natalie Wager not be waived.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? 7. The next item is the consent agenda.
I move to approve consent agenda items A through F.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions from anybody else? All those in favor? 7-0. Now under old business. Approve KASB recommended policy revisions and adoptions. Anything you want to say, Fred?
These are the ones that were presented to you last month. We got one more batch of new ones today, and that should be the last until we get the update from KASB.
It'll be the last until the next one. Any questions? I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve recommended revisions for policy GAOC, HAE, JQKA, and adopt new policies KNA and KNA.
Second.
I'll give it to Amy. Any discussion? All those in favor? 7-0. The next item is approved MOU with Flint Hills Technical College.
This is just the partnership with the current enrollment for the culinary arts program. So, should be one hour.
Any questions?
I move to approve the MOW with Flint
Go ahead.
Hills Technical College as presented.
Second.
Moving and second. All those in favor? 7. Approve adjusted grading criteria.
What this contains is just the addition of Opportunity Academy. With their situation, they want to remain on site until we get into that category. So it's just like what the CTE and some of those others. So I would hope to be able to.
I move to approve the adjusted grading criteria.
Second.
Moving and second. Any discussion? All those in favor? 7. Approved mode of learning for September 21st to September 25th, so next week.
So I put in the board docs the different criteria, the 3 status levels of the approved criteria and the additional 2. When we look at our trend data for Harvey County, it puts us in green. Disease spread also puts us in that green category. That percent positive at the time that I pulled that information was a 5.41, which puts us in the yellow. We look at our attendance data, and our student attendance data was 96.49 in attendance, and our staff, we only had 0.07 out during the course of this last week. So that also puts us in green. Looking at the other 2 criteria, the 2-week cumulative incidence rate, would put us in yellow, and then the local referring hospital capacity puts us in green. So, and Lynette Reddington is here. If you guys have any questions for Lynette, she said she would be glad to entertain any and or all questions, if you have any. They worked really, really hard to get that data to be as accurate as possible, and I just can't say how much I appreciate. I know it's a tough time for them. It's just about as tough for them as it is anybody in the state of Kansas, I think, because they're being pulled in 15 different directions. So if you guys have any questions for Lynette, she said she'd be more than happy to answer them.
Lynette, I just wanted to say thank you very much for getting that update. I know you understand it's so critical to us and the other districts in the county, and so thank you for working the midnight oil kind of thing and getting that all updated and working with KDHE. We really appreciate it greatly.
I have a couple of questions. Thank you for being here, first of all. Appreciate it. The first question I had was, I was just curious if our number of tests has been steady. As I look at percent positive, I just wonder, well, what happens if our testing goes up or down? I was just curious from the data that you've seen if we are getting consistent numbers of tests coming through and about how many are being tested in the 2 week period?
Sure. I can tell you that, as many of you know, I have worked diligently to figure out the data from KDHE and how it relates to us. So the testing one is a little bit different. They have definitely reported on the number of positive or the PCR tests that folks take, so the negatives and the positives get used in our percent positivity. I will say I did not look up the past 2 weeks, but I think I do have some information with me for today. I wrote that one. That would tell me, there it is, the total running of tests. So I've got it by week, and the total of PCR tests, and again, that's the gold standard test that KDHE looks at and takes as, yes, it's a positive or it's a negative. So just last week, we had 289, the week before 229, week before that 186. That's total tests that were done in Hardin County. So again, as numbers change, we get more tests done, we get more results, we see community spread or we don't. So that's what will happen. Know that the CARES Act dollars the county has received is also been earmarked for testing. So they are looking at some options on how we can do more community testing. We don't have those answers yet, but we are looking at that.
So do you think at some point we'll get to like a universal testing? So like if you want to get tested, go ahead and get tested. Because right now we're discouraging people that aren't symptomatic from trying to get a test.
Right now it's symptomatic, or if you've been a close contact and have at least one symptom, that sort of thing. Yes. Well, again, that is what Health Ministries was helping us with when they had their drive-through clinic. So we hope to get to something of that nature, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you for coming tonight, and thanks for sitting with me last week. We had a nice conversation. Thank you for all of your hard work on updating the dashboard. I could tell you were working really hard, a lot of you over the weekend, so thank you. Because quite frankly, your dashboard is far easier to navigate than the state website. So I love being able to come to just a one-stop place and see all of that. So I really appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Huge.
Thank you. There's definitely a team behind me, so.
Yes.
I'll
Well,
send
thank
it.
all of them for
Yeah, I
us.
will.
We appreciate that.
I will.
Thank you, Lynette.
All right, I do appreciate all of your efforts. I know COVID is not something we plan for or even want to keep living through. I'm right there with you, but the health department will continue to be as transparent as possible and give you what you need when you're asking. So, thank you.
Thank you.
And so Fred, if I'm reading this right on the student status for students, we actually have a higher percentage. of
In attendance.
Right,
In
in
attendance.
attendance. Okay. Okay.
And you think though, we've had not even a full week of school back yet, so
You would hope.
yeah, yeah.
You would hope. Okay. Any other questions on this, folks? Okay. I'll entertain a motion on the mode of learning.
I move to approve the mode of learning for September 21st through 25th as green.
Second.
You can have it.
I give it to Lucas. Any further discussion? All those in favor? 7-0. COVID update.
I've only got a couple of things, and you folks might have questions. There's 3 things that I think, like usual, things change a tremendous amount every week. Last week, we were given some stuff, some guidance from the Kansas State Board of Education, that we can look to waive some of the KESA requirements for this year, which originally we were scheduled to be a year 5 school, so it would be a year for accreditation, but they didn't have a year 4 visit last year. So I put that out in my weekly notes last week. My recommendation is going to be that we have our year 4 visit this year, and then we put the accreditation visit down to next year. So that's a positive for us, and it kind of gives me more time to learn the district, and us more time, frankly, set some of the things in place from a goal perspective and some strategic plans and stuff. Food service for remote learners and hybrid is going to start this week. Once again, last Monday, we heard that the at the federal level, but they were going to allow us to continue the food service, the summer food service program. So trying to get that in place in terms of for all of our students and for our remote and our hybrid learners. We're going to begin doing that this Wednesday. We'll be delivering to all of our remote and hybrid on Wednesday at the high school from 1 to 2:30. And the reason this is so tricky is like all of the lunches in for all of our students are going to be free this year, period. All right, which is great, okay? But when you think about it logistically, if you're going to serve your remote students or your hybrid students, they can only get 5 lunches a week, okay? And if they're hybrid, all right, they'll have 2 on-site and 3 off-site. You got to make sure that you're not giving a hybrid kid 5 meals. So we've got to figure out ways to make sure that we are not we're not giving away too many meals. So that's been part of the holdup, frankly, for some time. We met today to work through some of those logistics. So next week, a week from Wednesday, we'll actually start serving from 3:30 to 5 p.m. at the high school only. Okay. This first week, one of the things that makes this a little more complicated is that we have to actually see the kid and the parent this first time around. So that way we determine how many meals we need to be able to give to them. And then they're going to get a card that's going to be either showing them as remote or hybrid with the number of meals that they can pick up on that Wednesday. So it's not like we've just been sitting around and waiting for something to happen. And we're also pretty short-staffed in that department. So if you know somebody that wants a job, we're short-staffed in a lot of departments. So Elaine is really working the tail off to get that in place for our beginning this week. So, and we may have to make some adjustments. One of the nice things on the Wednesdays at the high school, not this week, but the following week, is that they will have that early release at 2:30. So we're hoping starting at 3:30 will give everybody enough time to be on campus enough to where there won't be a traffic jam. If you remember doing the produce, when they were giving away produce this year, I had a couple of phone calls from people saying, I can't get in to pick up my kids in practice because the line was so long to pick up that produce. So we may have to make some changes logistically, but we're kind of excited about that. The last thing, which I'm real excited about, is that we met with a group of superintendents, a small group with Dr. Watson this past Friday, and he told us we couldn't say anything over the weekend, so we kept our mouths shut. So the learning logs for parents, and I don't know if you guys have got any calls and have you fill out learning logs. We are no longer going to have to fill out those learning logs for kids, right? And that, if you remember those learning logs, we had to show that there was 360 minutes per day that those kids were devoting to school, right? But once again, the focus needs to be on the learning, not the seat time. And this is becoming a fairly large obstacle. And so the state board has been receiving a lot of input about this. And this is one of those pivots that I'm really so thankful that our Kansas State Department of Education has worked their tails on to ensure that we can do. Now, there's caveats associated with that. One of the things that I want to make really, really clear is that with the removal of those learning logs, we still have to have a rigorous education for those kids. And that's one of the issues with last spring, and that, when there were conversations at the legislative level, it wasn't good enough. And we all agree that that was the case. Right? So I'm really excited about this. This is going to remove a huge burden on the part of teachers and parents. Probably parents more so than teachers, frankly. So when we're hybrid or remote, they just have to do the learning. You still have to have that meaningful daily contact, which will essentially serve as the attendance. All right? And there is an assurances document that every parent will have to sign that says that they're going to do their part in terms of providing that opportunity and support for learning, and also making those kids accessible to the teachers. So that's a big deal for our families. So those were the 3 things that I wanted to update you guys on today. And there may be, if you have any other questions, there's a lot of stuff going on. These were 3 big things within the last week.
Okay, thank you. Next item is the approval of gift requests.
I move to approve the gift request as presented. We would like to thank Corner Heights Church for their donation to Sunset Elementary. Gift card to the value of $600. Thank you to Kansas Star Casino for their donation to Slate Creek Elementary for cards and dice, gambling in our buildings. Valuable $1,200. Charleston Insurance for their donation to South Breeze for water bottles for each student in the value of $500. Trinity Heights United Methodist Church, their donation to Sunset Elementary of water bottles in the value of $587.16. Thank you to So Shine Foundation for their donation to Slate Creek Elementary of water bottles in the value of $895. And then an additional thank you to the Newton Etc. shop for their donation to Chisholm Middle. And it was to purchase Kiva planks in the value of $350.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
7-0. Approval of the mask policy.
Mask policy has been in the works for a couple of weeks after a couple of different revisions. I know Melissa was on that committee with the rest of the fairly large team of pre-K through 12 educators. And this is our draft, or this is our copy. So we'd like you guys to read that.
Anybody have questions?
So not necessarily related to the policy itself, but I think we need to talk about what's the end game of masks. And I know the commission is going to reconsider, and not that I think it will extend, that's my assumption, but is it our idea, our consensus, and I'm not assuming, I'm asking, that we will kind of follow the lead of the commission with the mask mandate when they deem it time to not have to wear them, or is that something we're going to consider at that point, that we remove our mask policy? I mean, this is a question I get like 50 times a week from people. And it's fair, because when we're asking thousands of people to wear masks all day, and it's not the most comfortable thing. So I think it deems a little bit of discussion on what our plan is moving forward.
I think we should follow the lead of public health professionals, and not necessarily another governing body, because we all know how political masks have come. I think that we should listen to the public health experts and doctors, and whatever is clear to breathe air again, I'm okay doing so, but I don't want to wait for another governing body.
I do feel like that's loaded though, because today you get asked 6 different health professionals, and they would probably give you 6 different answers. So, which health professional, which body do we listen to at any given point?
I would say our public health department and the recommendations.
Ours?
Yeah, our county public health department.
Our health officer, Dr. Detweiler, who he and the health department typically are the ones that present and talk to county commission, give them their recommendations, and he'll be there tomorrow, I would assume.
Yeah.
So are you saying our county health officer, health department? I'm just trying to get
Yeah,
clarification.
probably, I'm sure those two will be working together as well. I doubt that they would have opposing opinions on the issue.
So if they were to recommend to the county commission at some point to stop the mask mandate, and their recommendation would be what you would follow?
Yeah, I would feel comfortable following public health people in their recommendation, whether that be the county officer or Lynette, or not saying poll every doctor in the county. I think that would, yeah, you would get different opinions, and that would,
and
that would not be our role, really.
And I'm not trying to come at you,
Yeah.
but that is something we get. It's like, but this health professional says this, and then people say, well, you need to listen to the health professionals. Well, which one would you like them to choose? Because they all, lots of them say different things, and we get it. The consensus, or I should say consensus, the majority of them are right now recommending masks. That's why we all have our masks on. But at some point, I think we're going to dwindle in numbers, and there's going to be a huge divide. And people who say, well, I don't care if we had no cases and we still need to wear our masks. And then there are going to be other people who say, well, I think we're pretty much over it, so we can stop wearing masks. So we just have to prepare ourselves if that's going to become probably an issue at some point, and we have to have a path forward so we're ready to go. And I'm fine. I mean, listening to our health department is what I have always intended to do. But I think we'll still get pushback at that point.
We're going to get pushed back regardless.
Right.
You know, I mean, you know, you listen to what the CDC and some of those other guidelines when they start talking about masking, and we'll listen to the Kansas State Department of Education, just like we did with the eating criteria. I mean, you know, with Dr. Watson, when he was talking today at our webinar, we were talking about the learning logic, and one of the things that he said, and I believe what he is saying in relation to that is, we can't think of this in the short term as it relates to this virus, based upon the release of a vaccine, you know, when it's going to happen, and the treatments and stuff. So we just have to think about how we're going to be able to adapt to whatever's going to be thrown at us from week to week. You know, Labor Day was just a week ago. We don't know what our cases are going to look like 2 weeks from now. We didn't know a week ago that we're going to be able to adjust learning logic. We're going to be able to do pretty much. So I just think we have to keep that open, flexible line all the time about this stuff, and not look for a way to get out of something. And I'm not saying that you are, but we just have to just listen to, you know, the trusted folks that we have in those health departments to be able to help us figure out the best way for our kids. This is stuff, because I get feedback too from teachers today, for example, saying you should not be in green next week. No way should you be in green. Well, when you look at the numbers, it says we need to be in green. If I listen to those individuals saying don't go there, you know, you feel a little bad, right? So, but no, these are the numbers, these are the gating criteria. We've got to follow with the data and use that to inform our decisions, and not let somebody that just doesn't want to wear a mask. I don't want to wear this. I hate this. But I also know it's not for me. You just got to develop that attitude. This is just really fun.
Yeah. I love that you put it on the table, right? Like, we do need to eventually think about what that looks like. And so I come from the mind my daughter hates it, my son can care less. So that's a personal experience, right? My daughter hates school just because of the mask. Everything else is great. She loves school, she loves her teachers, she loves her friends. Right now, she don't like school. But I tell her, we have to play what we have to do right now to keep you going to school so you can see your friends, keep the kids on the field, keep community going as long as we can. If this thing helps that for right now, so be it. So, but I do love the conversation. I think we need to start thinking about what that strategy looks like. I don't want to be the first, like Ricky Bobby moment, when you're not first in class or whatever. But I want to be first, but I also want to learn and borrow from others as soon as that starts happening and understand why they're doing it. I just think, for me, it's just really early in the game, in my opinion. I know some people will disagree with me, and that's fine, but we got to keep kids on the field, got to keep kids getting to school. We just went green. Wonderful. It's another win. To me, it's a good step forward to community, right, at the end of the day. So it's a tough decision that we're going to have to make eventually, but hopefully in a month from now, or less, we'll be having those conversations.
I think eventually that decision will be made, but I don't necessarily think it's us that needs to make the decision. I think we need to be, have a recommendation from public health people on the
But we
way.
will make a decision. Oh, I mean, we always, that's how we
Yeah.
function. We take recommendations, but we do make the decision.
I'm not saying we should decide when is the right time.
No, I agree. But that was my ask. Where does the end game come from? Is it from a recommendation from our county's health department? Is it, we wait for the CDC? Is it, whatever it is? I'm just trying to open that conversation of where everybody's at.
I think the more local the recommendation, the better too, rather than we need to tailor for CDC.
And I think some people, I'm sorry to interrupt, I think some people want an assurance that this ban does not go on indefinitely, which none of us want it to go on indefinitely. We don't have an answer tonight or a number tonight or anything like that. I mean, we'd love to get out of these as soon as possible, but I think letting people know, yes, we are listening, taking recommendations, working with other professionals to get to that end game. Hopefully we'll give them some assurance that we're not just passing this and it goes on indefinitely, so.
Well, and I think it's good to bring it up so that we, like Amy said, like you said, who are we going to be looking to when it comes to that decision.
I'm not asking us to say, let's set October 17th
Yeah.
for the day, that's not at all.
But people know that I know, but it's a conversation that will need to happen, so.
My birthday is November 13th, if you want to just go ahead and put that on there.
The whole world will work around your birthday, Jen. So I think acknowledging that, yes, we hear the concerns as parents, we're thinking about it ourselves as well. We're working towards that. We hear you. We hate this as much as everyone else, if not more.
And I do love the bullet point in the policy that says, work to create a culture of masks being the norm for kindness to others. And I think that's something that we also need to model in our behavior, in our words, and things that we post on Facebook and all of that, that, this is what we're doing for the community, kind of like what you were saying.
So I'm glad you asked the question to Jennifer, because I do want to remind people, this isn't for forever. And I like the idea of just listening to our local public health department. But with what we're putting in here, I also do want to make sure that I can talk about mask breaks. I really hope that all the students are getting that. I've got some intel, because I've got some insiders in the game. And I know that that doesn't necessarily always happen. So if we can get kids outside breathing fresh air a little bit, that probably helps a lot. I know that's different with different schedules. It can be difficult. And then even now, I have a hard time, with putting kids out for recess in a mask when they're 6 feet apart. So we don't have to say nobody needs to wear these things, but I would put my name out there and feel perfectly fine saying, I don't know if that's necessary. So we agree with this plan in general because we feel like it's what it's going to take to keep staff and students safe. But there's quite a bit of evidence that outdoors is a different situation. We're already telling them to be 6 feet apart. We've got some local, with the case studies, I'll say, with the fair happening, and not a single case coming from that. I think there's a big difference when people are outside. And it's just rough for me to imagine 5, 6, 7-year-old kids running around outside and being out holding hands the whole time. But that's, anyway, I don't want to do anything that would jeopardize anybody's safety, but I don't think that a student removing their mask during recess falls under the category. Okay.
So,
I just want to say I agree with you. Innocent.
So in looking through this, clearly a lot of time is put into this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but at least I read this a few days ago. Most of the focus is on students if they don't follow these guidelines, correct?
Yes.
How do we handle, like when Luke's saying, when we have staff who is maybe not appropriate in their handling of a mask situation with a student or not allowing the number of breaks needed? Where does that come into play with this?
That's always a lot tougher because you would hope that the professionals are going to always handle things appropriately. So we really struggle with saying you have to give this many mask breaks per hour or day or something like that. We have to make the assumption that our professionals are going to allow mask breaks, if they're going to do that at appropriate times. So we don't have a mask policy for our adults other than masks are required. All of our masks need to be, for all of our adults working in our system, unless they are strenuously working, like in our maintenance department or something like that, they're supposed to have masks on, okay? Or they're by themselves working in their office. So that's kind of the way or they get in with the distance.
And
So we approach that.
I would hope, and I would say the vast majority are doing things well, allowing mask breaks, handling those situations well. You would always hope that in every situation, but we also know that is not in every situation case. So I hope there's something, if they're not having mask breaks, that can be handled. Then another piece in here that I'm looking at when it comes to, let's just say high school, because then it'll be apples to apples a little bit. Scroll down here. Under first offense, second offense, third offense, there's pretty clear guidance as to what those consequences would be. Some of them are pretty intense compared to what consequences would be for other behaviors at the high school. So I hope that our intent kind of models some of the language in the student handbook at the high school, where the main focus of the administrative team will be working collaboratively with parents, teachers, and counselors and a student to address skills needed to limit future behavior issues, and that consequences will be carried out with equity and consistency. So where, if I'm looking at this, it's possible that on the first offense, a student could receive 1 day of out-of-school suspension.
This is, what you got mentioned, this is for insubordination.
And this is
just
definitely
for
different than
outright
elementary.
refusal. This isn't a kid doing this for a second in the classroom.
Mhm.
You know, and we know that there are going to be situations when even our professionals will react inappropriately, you know, based upon that. You're going to be maybe not regulated as a professional, and you'll make a bad decision in how you interact with that kid. What we hope is that our teachers have the capacity to regulate themselves when they can make a correction, or it doesn't get to that point. The focus of a lot of the conversations during the development of this was on educating the kids and getting them to understand why from the positive side, not from that coercion side. Okay? So, I mean, you know, I'm hoping nothing ever comes of this, but if it does, we will just deal with that. But I think our high school is looking at things more from a positive perspective than a punitive perspective. I think that was kind of the theme the whole time when we talked about this during those debates. So this is for outright refusal, insubordination, when it becomes a disrespectful thing. You know what I'm saying? This isn't the kid that just does that kind of stuff.
And I hope that, like you're saying, I hope that these consequences are a last resort. Hopefully it can be worked through in other ways to where it's not an issue. And yes, most high school kids are very different than your kindergarten kids, and their attitudes and adjustments and all of that. I also hope that when we do discuss on a high school level, or any level when it is clear insubordination, that we carry out the same mindset and expectations in other areas that we're putting out for masks, because I don't know that that's necessarily been done. So maybe this could be a good starting point of we expect certain behaviors and respect towards everyone else, not just the individual. So.
Well, and that was the intent in the conversation was, the expectation is we wear masks so that we can stay in school, so that we can participate in activities. And like Mr. Henry said, the total, for insubordination, this would be the next step.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, most high schoolers, know about masks and how we would be wearing them so that we can stay in school and do activities. So this would be a last resort if someone was just not following wearing a mask.
Because I see scaled down but somewhat similar consequences for every grade level, and I do hope that the intent is that those are last resort. That would be my assumption. Like I said, most of our staff I would completely believe would go that route. But as you're saying, times are tough. There's times when adults aren't regulated, and I think we've all had our moments. We've all been there. It's understandable, but I hope
That's
this
always, excuse me for interrupting, that's always been an issue I've had with zero tolerance types of policies, because a lot of times, you have that zero tolerance not taking into account the role the adult, the professional play in instigating something. So, and that's why when we look at some of these things, I really appreciate the language they put in there on trying to educate kids from a positive perspective and work with them rather than bring the hammer in. So I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. That was essentially what I was saying. That I hope the intent is not to bring the hammer down on these kids. And I feel good about our administration at the high school and how they will work with kids. So that's comforting. Hopefully we don't have any of these issues. From what I hear, at least at the elementary level, kids are doing really, really well. So that's very encouraging.
I move to approve the pre-K 12 math policy for 2020-21
second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Say aye. Approve YMCA agreement, Wayne Edge.
Right, so pretty happy to present this to you all for your approval tonight. Just real quickly, if you want to look up at the monitors or the screens, you can see a little bit of what we gleaned from a survey that Sam and I sent out to families in the district. But essentially was just asking if this type of a program was available, what is your likelihood of participating? And I know it's a little small, but it's effectively what it shows is about 60% or 60% of the people that we surveyed respond favorably that yes, they would like to enroll a child in a program like this if it were available. So I thought that was pretty powerful in showing that there is some type of need there. So effectively what we had was about, if we were to open this up tomorrow, we think that we have about 141 students that would be served through this program, or at least like I said, if they want to be part of this program. And so that's encouraging. But another piece that I really wanted to point out to you all was that they're looking at it more in terms of wanting to do a week-to-week kind of sign up. So they're following kind of the same pattern that you all have set in terms of setting what the gating criteria is for the following week. And so they're following in line with that. And so that's pretty promising in that people are starting to kind of get trained to the week-to-week decision-making mode. But I know that you all received information on what the YMCA Winning Edge project is, but just for those, especially those at home, what it really is a program for pre-K through 6th grade when we're in hybrid mode, that those students have an option or a place to go if they do not have the resources or they do not have the luxury of getting their instruction at home. And so what we partnered with the YMCA to do is to provide that learning environment, which actually, I know you all have seen this in the documents we gave you, but provide a structured environment for learning as well as exercise and activity. So I'm pretty pleased with what they've come up with in terms of what we would generally call the curriculum, but it does involve 2 hours or 2 study periods a day, as well as an hour dedicated to STEM, and then 2 periods dedicated to physical activity. So within that, it really does meet the requirements. I know that Fred talked earlier about getting away with those laws, but if the laws were there, it would meet the requirements of what that daily learning law would be. So I think it's an exciting opportunity. It's not a perfect answer. You know, it's one of those where we had to weigh heavily on what was the right thing to do and what our constituencies wanted, as well as what is the safest thing to do for our children. And you know, we can't necessarily come up with an exact agreement on what that is, but I think this does provide an opportunity for families out there. It's open to, like I said, pre-K through 6, but also any district employee that has children in that range as well, whether they're in the district or not. If they're working here in the district and have a child that fits in that category, they too can participate in this program. We price it at $45 a week, which comes out to about $1.88 an hour for service, which we thought was exceptional, and again, something that is really going to provide a good service to parents. So with that, I will take some questions just to clarify anything you all may have.
Are we charging this, or is the YMCA charging this?
Okay. We will be facilitating the financial transaction.
So is this fee, free and reduced, have any effect on the fee?
It will not. So it's
Because that's not an insignificant amount of money for some of our families. And I know when you break it down, you think, oh, that's no big deal.
Right.
But if you've got 2 kids, that's $100 a week, and we happen to be in that mode for 4 weeks, $400 a month, that's a large amount of money. And so I don't know if we need to have some consideration on whether we offer some free and reduced for those families who may qualify. I just feel like they're gonna be the most at risk. And they already don't have money to pay for things like this, and that's another burden on them, so.
No, I appreciate it, and I think it is definitely worth looking at a little more closely. One of the things for sure, and I'm glad while we have the survey out, because we didn't initially know what the interest level would be like. And so now that we have that interest level, we can dive a little deeper into, okay, what types of students are these? Where are they coming from? Is there a necessity to do something as you speak of? I think we can definitely look at that. Our intention was certainly good in that sense that it is already pretty heavily subsidized. You know, we did a lot of negotiations with the YMCA to bring it down to the price where it is right now. But I definitely can see where, depending on who we actually have interested in enrolling, maybe we can take that next step and say what else needs to be done.
Are we subsidizing it a little bit? We are. What is that cost?
So-
Yeah. Per child, or is it just a flat fee that we're paying? Or?
Yeah, so normally what a similar agreement has been like with other districts is roughly about $3,500 for the day for the use of the facility. And we're running at about $2,000. So about 130 some students, that's about a break-even point. But we're probably, so yes, we are subsidizing it in the sense that if we don't hit that break-even point on a daily basis, then we will be using our Sparks money from the county district money.
So we're kind of guaranteeing that.
We're guaranteeing that.
Okay.
Right. I mean, they're extremely generous, but they're also citizens. So
Sure.
we're trying to make sure that this works out for everybody.
And the use of the Sparks dollars could be, if you wanted to consider a sliding scale.
Right.
You know, it could be that we look at that frequently this month's level.
Yes.
And then talk about all the sliding scale.
I mean, as we get more interest, I think we would be negligent to our community if we didn't at least look into it for this reason.
And this would only be in hybrid mode of operation, not pilot. That's another one of those things too, in the remote, we have our own staff members that are concerned about what they would do. So, this is another thing.
Any other questions?
I do have a question, and it's kind of hard not knowing how many kids would be interested, and the survey went out, thank you for sending that, but it's a pretty short turnaround time, so 200, and I don't know my glasses, 38 responses perhaps. I don't know what that would balance out to, if you've got a good percent feedback or not. But I guess one of my questions would be, reading through this information, looking at the safety precautions they're going to take, they'll require masks, basically the same things that we're requiring in schools, and they will allow up to 250 students per day, correct? So that would essentially be the same size as most of our elementary schools. So my question would be, and a question that's been raised to me as well, if the YMCA and employees and kids will be following the same protocols of mask wearing and hand washing and distancing that we're following in schools, why is it safe for them to be on site at the Y and not on site in a building, especially since the district is, we have a hand in this. So why is it okay for them to be there? And also mixing of cohorts would be significantly increased at the facility at the Y versus our cohorts that we have now in classrooms. So what is the health, the risk, the benefit weighed here?
Sure. It's a lot, that question.
I'm sorry.
No, it's perfectly fine, and it's, I want you guys to rest assured that we've thought about these things, and now we're going to be honest with you, it's not going to be a perfect answer. I mean, it's one of those where, again, we had to pick the lesser of the two negatives here, and what our rationalizing was. But yes, the Y can take up to 250 students. That does not mean that is what we're going to want to push over there. You know, I mean, we definitely have an eye for safety. But when they were looking at, okay, in terms of insurance, in terms of what we think we can socially distance, 250 is our max. So if you've been over to the Y, you probably know it's about the 2 floors. And so what effectively they're doing is reserving that entire bottom main floor for this purpose. So all those gyms, all that space in there is what they're utilizing. Square footage wise, it's quite a bit. And so that's why, again, we're able to say that we think we can social distance. Now, there are chinks in the armor, absolutely. Are you going to have mixing with cohorts? Yes. But we hope that that's going to be minimized. They are going to be getting their temperatures taken when they walk in. And then once they get in and are enrolled in this program, they're going to be within that same cohort within the Y itself. So it's not necessarily like and I don't mean to, because I don't know that, it's not like you're going to the rec center and it's a hodgepodge. They will be, once they enroll, put into a cohort within the Y. So again, they'll move around through the modules with their cohort. Now, it's not perfect because it's not necessarily going to be the same cohort that they're in their traditional classroom with, but it is another group. I liken it to kind of like sports. You know, we've already set the precedent that it's okay to do it there. Those kids are also in certain classes within school, and then they get together with their team. This is very similar to that. But again, we do realize that there's some risk there, but that's as much as we try to mitigate it.
I'll just say this, it's to provide custodial care for those parents that still have to work and have no other way of doing this.
Right.
I mean, this is finding that balance between the COVID safety and then, you know, the normal social emotional stuff that we talked about forever up until this point. It's either this or those kids may be at home by themselves for 3 days during the course of that week, and mom and dad has to work. I mean, so that's why looking at this custodial care for all of these options. It's not great, but what would you rather them do? Either turn out to quit their job because they, for 3 days, have to be at home, or the 3-year-old, the 7-year-old is sitting at home alone. So, you know, to me, it's about at least providing something for these parents that have no other options to be able to send their kids to, and they know that they're going to stay. So that's the only answer that I can provide.
And I mean, we've had this conversation
Yes.
before. Custodial care it's huge in schools, whether we like it or not, that's the way it is. It's been that way for decades, and we can't change that now. This would be the worst possible time to change it, quite frankly. But I guess if other groups offer that sort of thing, that's fantastic, because yes, there's families who need help, and that's why I told you at one point, the hill I'll die on is keeping our younger kids in school as much as we can, because for many of them, that's the safest place. And we look at it, I don't want parents to have to consider leaving their jobs. And when you look at the numbers, primarily that comes down to women, and that's a huge hit. I don't want that, but if we're committing money to this, I personally have a hard time saying I'm willing, and as an individual, to earmark money for this. And yes, there's safety precautions in place, which are fantastic. They match up to in school, so it's safe for you to be here, but it's not safe for you to be in school. I have a hard time with that, and I think that's what I'm getting a lot from the community as well. If we're saying these mitigation practices are in place, and no, they're not going to be perfect. We wish they were, but they're not. I mean, that's what we're doing in our schools every day. We're doing our best. If they're safe at the Y with those practices, why aren't they safe in a building with those practices? And I think it's a very valid question, because at the school building, you will still have custodial care, you will still have food, you will still get your education, get all of those pieces. So why, if we're going to partner with it, why are we saying it's safe on this site with these different kids, but it's not safe on this site?
So you're suggesting, like, if we were to move to 4A, it would make more sense just to keep our K-6 in person, because we would be providing those things, which we're saying is safe in the Y.
That's a big fight. I don't know that I've got that tonight, but looking at some other districts, and no, I'm not talking about changing ours right now. Don't misquote me in the paper. But just, I think people need to realize we can't have these conversations anywhere else. We have to think out loud in public. We have to have these conversations in public, so it gets messy sometimes. But at least we're being transparent. Other districts are kind of opening it up to if there's kids that don't have internet, and perhaps their district's not doing hotspots. So we have, you know, that advantage. So it's not the same. But if there's students who don't have internet or really need to be on site, even if they're in a hybrid section, those parents can get their kids on site full time. Some may not need that. My kids, I am home. So I have a hybrid kiddo right now, and I'm able to be home with them. A lot aren't.
And I know you're not necessarily looking at it this way, but there's many ways to look at this. Another way to look at it is this, is simply that by not offering something like is by saying, well, we're going to keep all the kids in school, what you're effectively doing as well is denying those families that would say, it's not safe for my kid to be in school, and I want them to be able to go home and learn at home during that time period. So you're also doing that as well. I mean, and that's the hard part of it is no matter what you do, you're making an assumption and a decision for a group of people. And either way, we're going to get pretty big criticism. But what I would go back to is their K through 12 education within the school district is compulsory. Participation in the Ymca program is not. And so that is a very big difference. That makes all the difference, honestly. Because, again, it may not feel like the person has a choice because they have to get their daycare or they have to get their kid to school, but they actually do. And while we're not able to go in and 100% take the financial burden off their shoulders by the risk of COVID-19, what we can give them is a choice as an adult, as a parent that's running their household to say, what makes sense for me and my family? And this would be one of those options. So I like that, as imperfect as it is. Again, going back to K through 12 in school education is compulsory. This is not. So it makes them, the parent, hopefully they like it, be able to choose and make a decision. But I think it's on us to provide what those options are, and this is one that seems viable.
And I agree, you're absolutely right. So parents at the end of the day are in charge of their children and they get to make those choices. And when I was throwing out, not that I'm putting it out for discussion or decision by any means, but other districts who are saying, if you can go hybrid and you're able to do that, that's fantastic. That actually helps your family, it helps other families. It's a great thing, like our remote students, that's fantastic. If you're not, can you opt in to be on site or go hybrid if you're able to? I don't know, so many different things to think about.
And see, we talked about that with the 5th and 6th graders with perspective. We placed them on 7th and 12th group with the 5th and 6th. And it all goes back to logistics on the part of our teaching staff to be able to deal with the on-site kids and the off-site kids at the same time. That's going to be tough enough as it is, but then if you've got kids, when you weren't planning on having kids in the room that day, we have to have somebody on-site supervising them. So you have to have that teacher in that classroom supervising, in some cases, that the kids that were remote, and then also those kids that parents chose to send them to school in that environment, and that's almost untenable from a management perspective on the teachers. So it's a no-win, you know, and that's what we struggle so much with those 5th and 6th graders. We really tried so hard to come up with a way where we can give parents a choice in that way. But my teachers, just frankly, they can't do it.
Right.
And you don't have personnel to support them, really.
And let's just to give this perspective, let's look at it mathematically. Okay, I told you tonight that we have 141 students interested. Now, I don't know what that number is, but there is a certain number of how many elementary age students are in the district. And I'm going to guess it's 1,000. Okay, but my point is that in this environment, in this scenario, most of those kids will be at home learning. I only have 141 here. Yeah, it could be 250. But the point of it is still that by using this, we only have that 250 that are in the next best thing or in some type of riskier learning environment. So the rest of those kids are at home. And so if you don't have this and you have the schools open, you have 1,000 kids that are in a less than ideal learning environment. And so that's, I hope I'm making that real clear, but yeah, you could have 250 kids be in a less than ideal environment, or you could have 1,000 by keeping the schools open. And that's the trade-off.
I just have one more question about our subsidy portion of this. Are we only paying when we move to Orange? Or is this a contract we're entering in X amount of dollars through December, I said, or November, December when we bring it out?
No, they've been, again, extremely generous, and thank you for asking. It's just when you guys decide to move to Orange. And that's what implements it, and it's only for that upcoming week. So we'll go to a weekly sign up based on it's bi-week, and so that's how we're being charged. So district is also going to be supporting it in other ways. If you look at documents, there's things like providing an on-site nurse's aide, as well as helping with the study hours, as well as providing the food service. So the district is definitely going to be involved in making this successful. And we're also going to be pretty involved in, again, helping the line keep with the social distancing practices, keeping with the mask ordinances, keeping with hand washing. So we hope that, again, while not perfect, we're going to try to mitigate the spread of COVID as much as we can so we get to a better state.
So you said something that you got me confused. Is it K through 6 or K through 4?
Pre-K through 6. Sorry. Pre-K through 6.
And did you say 130 kids is about the number for our break even?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
All right, I move to approve the contract with the Ymca for the 2020-2021 school year to provide childcare options for the USD 373 hybrid learning environment as presented.
Second.
Can I add one little caveat? I don't know if this would be that we will look at trying to subsidize this a little bit. Is that?
Yeah.
Would that be allowed to read the motion?
When do we know? Because that is,
Free and reduced perspective.
Yeah, something
like this, go, free and reduced.
Something along those lines.
that is a concern that I have as well. Those families that they really need it, can they afford it? Because if we're going to do this, I want some of our really at-risk kids to be able to get in there.
Yeah.
So when would you, do you have any idea when you might know?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think that we should decide that, and we can tell you that right now. But yeah, we can put in a sliding scale for the reviews, exactly what that would look like, with the details that we work out. But the spirit of it is, will we have that scale in there and reduce the $45 down to whatever it may need to be based on their income and their qualifications for reviews? Absolutely.
So then the difference would come out of Sparks
Yes.
funds?
Until the end of December.
How are we doing with those?
Yeah. We like to spend it. No.
I know, I totally trust you, I just kind of.
Right, no, okay, so to put it a different way, so when Fred and I applied for that Sparks grant, we earmarked $50,000 for custodial care. So in our minds, we have $50,000 that we're working with to pay for this at the YMCA, as well as some other things that may come up. But the point is, yeah, so that's what the amount is that we're moving around. So that's why I can tell you tonight, yes, we can do something with a sliding scale for those families.
And how long of it, remind me, when does Sparks have to be spent by?
Through December.
So we would have enough in that to cover this with the sliding scale
Right.
through December.
Right. And then like a lot of things, at the end of the semester, we might have to go back and look at, well, hopefully we'll be in a lot better situation with COVID. But that's always been the big assumption. And if we're not, then we're going to have to reevaluate where we are with some of these programs. But in addition to that, I think if we're reevaluating, so is the federal government in terms of what kind of other aid packages might be needed. So it's no guarantees, but I think we're in a good spot.
We need to add some language at the end of it.
What's that?
We need to add some language to the end of it, with the sliding scale.
You want that to mirror like what we do for textbook with respect to?
What would that kind of look
We
like?
do
Could you
need a
give us
cutoff
an
time
example?
with the sliding scale.
Yeah, so that's $45. I mean, it'd be just like free and reduced lunch, more or less, if you qualify, and then you get half of it for certain amounts, and then that would be $22 roughly, or it's free. So that would be the thing. I mean, I would really just mimic free and reduced lunch, just move it proportionally.
I think that's what you're looking at.
So either
If we have an issue, we'll come
half
back.
or free.
Just say as amended.
And
Your second's still good?
Joni's over there scrolling.
I know.
Well, I was sitting here wondering if we need to take a vote on the first motion and then make a second motion. I'm
That's
not quite sure that we
fine.
want.
Or, and just add the caveat of the sliding scale with free and reduced, make a motion for that motion. Is
Yeah.
that what you want? Tell us what to do, Joni.
I'm not quite sure. Fred, do we need to close this first motion?
I think
can we just add it?
I think you can just add it.
Okay.
Okay. So with that, motion and second, right? Okay. All those in favor? Stand up. There you go. Thank you. Approved data increase for Kajit.
Kajit, those are those hotspots. We bought the lowest data amount possible. And we've been able to, you can shift the data around a little bit, but with all of the programs that are being run, we need to have more data. And so I put in there what it would cost if we were to continue using those on a yearly basis for next year. But you guys have the additional cost of, what was it, 60?
It's up there, right?
You have that there?
63.
937.50 for the 250 hotspots. And if not, what happens is, just like what happened over in Walton, when we had the trash truck hit their line coming in, so they were without any internet access, and we sent 4 of those Kajit hotspots over there, and within about an hour and a half, they couldn't use them anymore because there was more than one person on them. You know, so they just become a puck after that. So we kind of learn as we go in terms of that amount of data. So it's not unreasonable for that data amount. When and talking with Brenda, where I was at before, we got them for about $35 a month, and we also have to pay for the hotspot. So it's within that realm, and this has a lot more functionality in terms of being able to load this.
Are all of our hotspots out to students right now?
Not yet, not all of them.
Okay.
Brenda, how many do we have on?
We have probably just over 50 to 60 left.
Yeah, so they're close.
The majority. How are they working for people out in the sticks, essentially? Are they able to use it? How is that going? Are they
Yes.
still having trouble?
No, the provider is Verizon, and
Okay.
as I've been told, Verizon is one of the only providers, cell phone providers that works in those areas. So.
Right, we've got a lot of rural people, and we
Right.
know coverage is hit or miss out here, and so.
Right.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
No, and the people I've been working with, parents a lot, to troubleshoot hotspots and to deal with using up data. And none of those actually have been people that live out there. So,
Okay.
and to get to decide what we needed, we were watching the data usage. The first day, halfway through the day, very first day of school, we had reports of hotspots already being used, the data being used up. And
Do they have, is it like a daily allowance or?
Yeah, good question. So they had it set as a monthly and a daily.
Okay.
So the way it was set, which would have worked if our kids were doing very basic things, but I tell you what, our teachers have embraced all the tools we have, which is amazing, but that uses a lot of data. But we can see what's going on and what sites they're visiting. The hotspots are filtered, so they can't get to non-educational sites. They can try, which uses data. And so I've, told parents about that too. And if I saw that they were hitting a lot of sites, or trying to go to a lot of sites that they shouldn't, and it was using data, I've given that information to parents too.
So even with the unlimited data, they don't have just full reign?
Right.
That is one of the power of like these over just like a Verizon hotspot or a Ymca, is that it's harder to filter down like what these were made specifically for education. They are really good for education.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I move to approve the bid as presented to increase the data capacity for the district hotspots.
Second.
Moved in second. All those in favor? Stand up. Department of Justice. Right, I didn't realize that. I better recuse myself. This is my boss. So,
That's your boss?
Department of Justice is my boss.
Well, that's actually more of an announcement. I don't think.
I'm just saying.
I've been waiting all night for this
Yeah.
item.
Again, real happy to talk about this. And
I'll take the thanks.
yes, as you should.
It was all unit, work
It was
was all
all
the
unit.
same.
Definitely some work by you all that predates me, and especially some work with my predecessor, Mr. Matt Morford, who was not able to be here tonight because of some other obligations, but definitely a lot of hard work that he did along with the team in securing what's going to be essentially a $500,000 infusion for school security within our school. So it's really awesome. It's a $375,000 roughly grant from the Department of Justice that the USC 373 has another $125,000-ish obligation. But within the documents I sent you, you can kind of see effectively what the main two areas of influence that this is going to have. And it's going to be providing that electronic access as well as providing cameras within each one of the school buildings just to make them a lot more secure. And what's really nice is this is something that I know Fred and that you all have been wanting for quite a while. So it hit at just an excellent time for us. The nuts and bolts of it is that here within the next couple of weeks, we're going to be looking to get some possible bid partners or contractors to come and do some assessments and look around at our buildings and see how close we can get to this price range. I think we're right in there, but that will be happening, and then so I'll update you as we continue to move through the grant process. But overall, if you can think out a little bit, we're hoping that we have all of this in place, unfortunately not for this year, but for next fall. So next fall, the security system should be at each one of the schools. And so with that, I'll quit talking. Is there any questions that you guys might have? No, I don't have exactly all the answers, but I can fake it.
I'll just say something. We got to give credit to Dr. Ham too. She was a part of putting this together. DH Pace, I think, was the group that came out with the security assessment. So I want to make sure we give her some credit for this as well.
Was this the grant that we applied for last year?
Yes.
And we were kind of like a runner-up?
Yes.
And they basically said, well, you'll get it next year, right?
Yeah, I believe that's the case. And Jerry Moran, I think it might leave the notes you guys read that he called me this week. That's why he called me, was to let us know that we received that this grant. So
That was a good phone call.
it was a great phone call.
I
It was a
know
great
this
phone
is
call.
all over social media and in the papers that we're the only district in Kansas that got this. We even caught a break for once.
did,
We
yeah.
caught a break, and this is huge. I am so excited about this.
And
Amazing.
you know, I have to say that in all honesty, I don't think we expected this much money. I
don't remember if we,
I don't think
if
it was
they talked
this
about an
much,
actual
but I'm
dollar
grateful.
amount.
Oh, this is fantastic. So, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, well, when you guys submitted the grant, you asked for $375,000. We got $374,785. So.
Yeah, we had nothing for us to approve. We just get it,
No,
right?
no,
Yeah.
no, you just have to remember, you have to take 125,000
Right.
capital outlay to plow.
No, that's, yeah.
25 that we can spend.
All right, next item, draft 2020-21 substitute handbook.
Just really updating dates. Jane did a great job of making sure that this was all put back together. Seriously, with a lot of the things, a lot of the manuals and stuff, we're probably behind where we would normally be because some kind of a virus has kind of been involved with most of our planning for the fall. So we just wanted to get this out to you. If you have any questions, you guys can approve that, I believe, next month. If I want to look at that between now and then.
And the next item is the KASB recommended policy revisions and adoptions.
Those are the last set of policies, like I said, until the next things coming out. Joni has been through those. Most of those are not huge, mainly revisions. I think they're all revisions. It's just some word changes and things of that nature. So if you want to look over between now and the next meeting, if you have any questions, let me know. We'll get those questions answered if you have them.
Next set of reports, and last thing is board comments. Luke?
Thanks everybody for the hard work. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
everyone for their hard work, and I've been able to catch a few activities in the last week, and it was great to be seeing kids participating, so, yeah.
Thank you to the mask policy committee, and Melissa for serving on that. I'm sure those were a lot of really hard discussions to have. I do want to request something be added to our next agenda. So Matt, I don't know how you want to handle this, but we did all receive a letter from 22 Santa Fe teachers, probably a couple weeks ago now, asking us to reconsider having 5th and 6th graders grouped with the elementary kids in the dating criteria. They made a lot of really good points that I think that we should discuss as a board and make sure that we are still comfortable with that decision of where those kids are grouped on the dating criteria. So I would like that to be added to our agenda for the 28th, if there's consensus to do so.
Is there anybody else who wants to add that?
I just feel like this has been hashed and rehashed. And I'm not interested in.
We haven't discussed it though since we got that letter from them on the 26th. I think that was probably a lot of
Most of the
information.
things, either publicly or Fred has worked with the administration at Santa Fe to work as best as they could through those issues. Just my opinion.
I guess, really, is there anybody else that wants to, we agree that we need 4 people, so.
I think the conversations have, I'd have to go back and look at that list again, but I believe most of those conversations have already taken place, like Jen was alluding to Fred handling that, not necessarily the board handling that or having those conversations. But I think a lot of those pieces have been discussed prior to the decision from you, correct?
I have to go back and read the letter, guys, that was a couple of weeks.
I looked at it as well, but my.
That was one of the reasons for the addition of the teacher, to be able to try to get more students, spread those students out. But you still have the issue of 500 and some students in that building. And it's still tight. I mean, it
It's
is.
very tight. I mean, the pictures they sent us, the classrooms are very tight. So if I'm the only one that wants to have that discussion, that's fine. We can move on. But I just wanted to bring it up because I think it's important.
I mean,
Really listen to our teachers.
When I looked at that, the list of issues there, I mean, they still have the same problem at the moment that we're in green. Whether we group them with 7 through 12 or not, next week is gonna be green. So, I mean, we still have to fight all those same issues. It's just a matter of making it more likely that they're hybrid. And I think there's other things that we could do. I mean, I know I sent Fred an email as soon as I got that. And, I think there's solutions that administration can work on to try and make it better, but we can't, it's not going to be a perfect world. And the second that we're in green, having them at 7 to 12 doesn't matter, they're still all in the school.
Yeah, but the second we're in green, it's a safer community risk factor, so everyone should.
Well,
We
and
have
I
to
guess
caution
with
the folks, too.
the addition of the teacher was to help spread those kids out so that the classrooms aren't as full. So
But it doesn't solve all of the problems that they, that's, I mean, I don't want to have the discussion right now, that's why I asked for it to be on the agenda in 2 weeks, so if there's not consensus to do that, that's fine, we can move on.
Just thank you to everyone who's been working so hard. I get to live the life of a parent with kids in school and a parent with kid in hybrid the last couple of weeks. So we've had technology issues, we've had parent logs, we've had all of those sorts of things. So I get to live it firsthand. Shout out to my oldest son's teachers who have been so kind and helpful and working through those issues and patient and really great. So yes, I just appreciate the hard work that everyone's been doing. And at first day of school drop off, seeing staff so excited and so welcoming, and the smiles from everyone was amazing. So thank you to all staff.
I'll just give one additional thank you to Lynette and the health department. Lots of hard work. I know there's been confusion and frustrations and all of these negative thoughts surrounding COVID and all the data that comes with it, but they have really worked hard to make things more transparent for us. I know Mallory Lanier, right? Sat down with Lynette and she just really helped to clarify some things and I mean, it was obvious on the dashboard once they got started working on it. And I appreciate that, not just for my own clarity, but so the community has a better gauge on the data we're using to make the decisions for their kids and our staff. So
Anything else? Motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second. Move it second. All those in favor? Thank you.
Yeah.